Welcome to the Linden Hill Musser Mansion Kitchen. I'm here today because we are so disappointed to have canceled our high tea event. And we would have loved to be able to host people here in the early part of May for our second annual high tea. We've had some other teas in the past, and we brought the concept back with a high tea last year. So looking forward to the idea of having our second one. Very good response to it. And then we were so sad to be responding out to people or replying out to people, letting you know that we weren't able to hold that. We hope everybody is at home doing well and staying healthy. And for us, we wanted to do something to sort of bring the high tea to you. So in the spirit of the high tea, I have a couple things that I need to get myself ready for this. Get yourself a good cup of tea. Milk or a lemon slice is always a good thing. If you're afraid of black tea, you could always go with a good fruit or herbal tea too. It's so good. All right, let's get ready to bake. What we're going to make today is a very basic, simple, traditional scone. So there's a lot of different varieties and recipes out there. I'm going to encourage you to go to one of the your favorite cookbooks or your favorite cooking website and pull up a recipe for a traditional English scone, or British scone, depending on your wording. Basic idea, they're very simple pantry staple type things, and I'm going to throw in a couple of tips for you to be able to utilize if you are not quite sure, if you have some of those maybe a little bit more specialty pieces. So my first example with that is I'm just going to get a big bowl out, a nice big mixing bowl. It's clear, it's kind of hard to see. We're going to get a big mixing bowl out, and then we're going to start with 4 cups of flour. Now, the recipe that I'm working off of actually calls for self-rising flour. Not everybody has self-rising flour just as a staple in their pantry. If you do, great, go ahead and use it. If you don't, you can always Google the idea behind how to make my own self-rising flour, or you can just kind of go with the idea that for 4 cups of flour, you're going to be adding about, there's a couple different methods for it. Some say add baking powder, some say add baking soda, but you would be using 4 cups of all-purpose flour and adding in something like 2 teaspoons of baking powder. There are some that use baking soda too, so if you don't have baking powder, just keep looking for another option. These are pretty forgiving. So the idea is going to be then your 4 cups of flour, and I pre-measured so that you didn't have to see me making a mess. I wanted to be more refined than I normally am with my baking. Normally I'd have flour all over. So we've got 4 cups of flour, and mine was that self-rising once again. The next thing that you're going to do is a pinch of salt. So if I was certain popular chefs, I'd say over the shoulder for luck, but I want to just tell you a pinch of salt. So I am just going to take my salt shaker and do a little bit in my hand and stick it in with my flour there. Now, depending on your recipe, again, you may have a recipe that calls for sugar. I personally don't think that it needs it because I like to put jam on my scones, and jam has sugar in it and lots of flavor, so I don't put sugar in mine, but you could add up to 1 tablespoon of sugar. Depending on what you're doing, if you wanted to add in some raisins or something like that, you could, and then maybe you would like a little sugar with it. The next thing we're going to do is get some chilled butter, and I'm going to grab that really quick. So I kept it in the refrigerator for a purpose. When you are baking and it calls for chilled butter, it's usually doing that because you're making some kind of a pastry type crust sort of thing. And the chilled butter is going to interact with the other ingredients differently, and the fat from the butter is going to incorporate and connect with those ingredients as it bakes differently, and it's going to give you a different texture as a result. So what I did was, I'm going to try and show you nice and close here, I just cubed. It says butter diced and chilled. So I just cubed it up. It's nice little, I don't know, quarter-inch butter cubes, and I'm just going to put all of these into the flour. And there's a little bit of salt and the raising agent, baking soda, depending on the flour you used. So this step step is real simple. It's going to take a little while, so we're going to pause and come back in. But the idea is just simply that I'm going to take the butter and I'm going to rub it between my fingers in with the flour. And you're going to do this until the butter is all connected and you're sort of just, you know, rubbing your fingers back together like this, but you're doing it with the butter and the flour together. So you're combining that and you're going to do it so that you have a nice little fine sand kind of texture. So we'll be back in just a minute once I get this done. It's a little time consuming, but if you have little kiddos with you, this is really fun. Can't guarantee you all the flour and butter is going to come back into the bowl, but they will have fun and it'll be a really good memory. So we'll be back once we get our butter incorporated here. All right, so we've got our flour combined. I washed my hands. And the next step is real simple. If you have buttermilk at home, you are absolutely welcome to utilize that. If you don't have that, you could substitute it with some yogurt, maybe thin it out a little bit with a little splash of milk. But what I'm going to do, this is sort of my go-to at home. If it calls for buttermilk and I don't have any in my refrigerator, I just grab a lemon, or if I've got a bottle of lemon juice, you can always use a slug of that. But the idea is simply to add some lemon juice to your milk. So this recipe called for 1 2/3 cup of milk, and I'm going to do the juice of half of a lemon, or about a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons maybe. I'm not really specific about it, honestly. The idea is just simply adding some of that acidic lemon juice into the milk, and it helps sort of curdle it, and you'll see that once you do it. But if you're using a fresh lemon, anytime you're going to juice a lemon, roll it on a table. It's going to help break apart some of those little cells inside so that they're going to juice a little easier. And then you'll just cut your lemon in half. And here at in the Linden Hill kitchen, we have this cute little vintage juicer. I don't know if you can see that. But if you don't have that, you can also use a fork. So trying to kind of give you a bunch of different options in terms of how to do whatever you have at home. Use whatever you have at home. So you would just take the fork, stick the tines in, and squeeze the lemon around the tines of the fork. But you'll just take your lemon and, like I said, half of a lemon. You won't use the whole thing. Try not to get any of the pips in there, the little seeds. That would be not the best adventure in eating a scone. And then we'll just add this into our milk. Leave that sit for about a minute or so, because that's going to give the lemon juice an opportunity to interact with the milk that's there. So I'm going to just give that a minute here. So our milk has set with lemon juice in it for about a minute or so. And now I'm going to mix this into the flour butter mixture. So I'm going to pour it in quick and mix carefully but quickly. So I'm just going to be creating a rough ball here, because I'll be laying it out on the counter in a moment to get it into a rolled out piece. So you can see it's basically stuck together there. It's not a whole lot of extra flour or anything. That's going to be good. Don't want to overmix stuff. All right, so I'm just going to dump this right out onto the cleaned and sanitized counter. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So we're going to go ahead and get this on to our counter here, and good enough. Stick that there. Get rid of my mixing spoon, and I'm just going to be combining this together. You're going to find there's little spots that are sticky and little spots that are really dry with the flour. It's because we didn't overmix it. That's a good thing. You might think, oh, I need to add more liquid because it's kind of crumbly at this stage. You don't need to. It will come together as it bakes, and it's better if you don't, because otherwise you're going to have these big blobs, and you want it to keep structure. So we're going to go ahead and keep this rolling. And I'm going to grab my rolling pin here. In this bowl, I have just a little bit of my flour, and I'm going to rub that on the rolling pin because I don't want the rolling pin to stick to those little wet bits. So just a little bit of flour. I'm not going to flour extra here. It'll come good, I promise. Unless you did it wrong, then I don't promise. So you're going to be rolling out not too thin. You want to go definitely under an inch. You can go you can go thinner or thicker if you want to have a little bit more height to your scone, but you don't really have a magic thickness. Certainly you don't want to go as thin as a sugar cookie, but the idea would be that you will just watch them when they're in the oven. So if you make them thin, you want to make sure you don't just bake them for the full length of time. Most recipes are going to tell you how thick they want you to roll that specific one out. So if you are at home and you have a round cookie cutter or a fluted edge, scalloped edge cookie cutter, biscuit cutter, you are absolutely welcome to use that. You can also just use a cup. So I have just a glass here, and I'm going to use the drinking part of that to be my scone cutter. So you'll just cut scones, and then getting them out is a little bit of work. But so I have just from that cup a nice size, about the size of my palm, a nice scone. So I'm going to stick that on see if I can get this in the foreground here. I just have a baking sheet with some parchment on it. You don't have to use parchment. It just makes it for easy cleanup and that you're not going to have any sticking on there. You don't have parchment, don't let it keep you from making these scones. Just follow the directions you're using whether or not to spray, because different recipe combinations will stick and some won't. So I'm going to use the parchment. I have also heard of people using brown grocery bags for that, but I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. You could look it up though, maybe. Oh, so many things to research. So I'll just go ahead and keep making my scones here. Once you get to the point where you've got a circle cut out of your whole set of dough here, you are going to be able to roll that all back together, like if you were making sugar cookies. You know, grab the scraps and roll them back together into a ball, roll it out again, and make some more. So you'll be able to get quite a few out, and you don't have to make them a certain size. You can certainly make small, and those are really fun, especially if you're doing lots of small food bites. There's a lot of really sweet recipes for different types of tea pieces, whether that's like finger sandwiches or little petit fours, things like that. If you want to get really fancy, you can try those. But the whole thing is there's a lot of small food things, and so that could be really fun if you just did a small little scone. Just once again, watch that baking time. Okay, so I've got my mess cleaned up a little bit. I've got my scones all on a baking sheet, and so I actually ended up with 2 baking sheets. So this batch makes quite a few. But what I wanted to let you know is as well, you should brush the tops of these with some milk, and that will be the thing you do right before you put them in the oven. So I've brushed them with some milk, and it's not making them like saturated or crazy wet or anything, just a little brush. And if you don't have that, you can actually just use a spatula dipped in and just put that over top, and you'll get some general pieces, or general coverage with that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I really want to show you this funny little guy. So after I cut all of my scones, I had just this little bit of dough left, and I just flattened it out. And so we're going to call this our little ugly duckling scone. It's not very round, but that's okay because it's still going to taste really good. And I always figure that if you have like the remnants of your dough left and you pat it into a little thing, it's going to cook evenly with the rest of them, similar width or height and things like that. But then that can just be the one that you taste test before you serve them to all your family. Let's put these in the oven. We set the oven to about 450 degrees for these. Some are going to call for 400, 425, but basically you do bake them at a pretty high temperature. And then this recipe calls for about 20 minutes. At about the 15-minute mark, we're going to start taking a peek at them. We want to make sure that we don't over bake them and burn them. All right, it looks like our scones scones are about done. They smell wonderful. That's the worst thing about the video is I wish you could smell how good these smell. But you can see that we've got a nice golden brown on the scones. I'm gonna take a risk of getting my fingers really hot. You can see how nice and golden brown that is on top. That is very warm. But so while we are letting them cool down a little bit before we enjoy, we want to share a few different things that you can put on your scones. Of course, you can put on butter, you can put on jams and things like that. One of my absolute favorites is lemon curd. So if you are a fan of lemon, try out lemon curd. And there's recipes for that online, but it's not the easiest of recipes, but so worth it if you can crack it. That's one thing that people loved at our high tea last year was the delicious homemade lemon curd. Now another thing that's really traditional with scones is something called clotted cream. It's not very common around here. We don't use it that often, but it's really common in England, the idea of eating your scones with clotted cream. Since it's not that common around here, you can of course order it online and things like that, but it's actually not that difficult to make. The key part of it is just getting non-ultra pasteurized heavy whipping cream, and then you're going to put that in the oven really low for a long time. So you can find a recipe online for that, but it's just called clotted cream, and very traditional to have with scones. So if you can't quite figure out what I'm saying from the hearing what I'm saying over the video, you are absolutely welcome to just look up something like clotted cream, however you think that's coming out, with scones, and you'll come up with a hit that's the right thing. I'm certain of that. Super traditional. So that is once again a really simple way to do it, and it's this rich cream spread that kind of gets a nuttiness to it because of that toasting and kind of baking in the oven. So it's just one ingredient. It's just that heavy whipping cream, not ultra pasteurized. You're going to get that, put that in the oven in about a 1 inch or so layer. Your recipe will tell you what to do, but you could try that for a really, really traditional like afternoon tea, the scones with clotted cream and jam. So pairing those things together. Really, really delicious. I don't have clotted cream prepared today, but I'm just going to show you what this scone is like when I break it apart. It's still quite warm, but I don't know if you'll be able to see the steam. Yeah, look how good that looks. Okay, so this wonderful scone, and I do have some butter and I have some homemade jam. So I'm going to grab that really quick. So my butter is going to melt really beautifully on my fresh out of the oven scone. Just going to stick that on there. Grab a spoon quick and give a good scoop. So tasty. And because this doesn't have any extra like flavorings in it or anything, it's going to lend itself really nicely to whatever you put on top of it too. So the kind of your imagination and your palate is the limit here. So I'll give you a little close up on that. Some tasty scones for you to enjoy. And if this recipe made too many for you to be able to enjoy right away when you've just taken them out of the oven, especially since we can't be gathering our friends together right now, they do freeze pretty good. So you can stick those in a airtight container, put them in the freezer, and then you can just warm those babies back up when you're ready to have a cup of tea or coffee, but traditionally tea with a scone. We hope that you had a really good time watching this video. We hope that you are able to do something like a little personal self-prepared high tea. We miss you all. We hope that you're able to come back to Linden Hill soon when it's safe to, and we just pray that you are all safe and healthy, and look forward to being able to serve you a high tea here at Linden Hill once again. For the meantime, we hope you enjoy. We thought of one more thing before we go, so we had to turn things back on, but we just wanted to throw out the idea as well to you. Lots of great things that go on here at Linden Hill. Our organization that cares for, sustains, takes care of everything here is the Friends of Linden Hill. And we are a nonprofit organization that does this to be able to continue the arts and cultural heritage tradition of this place, as well as sharing it with the community. So while we exist to preserve and share this place, we right now have been canceling a lot of those things. So we recognize that there's a lot of opportunities missed, both for you to be enjoying Linden Hill and for our organization to be raising the funds that it takes to be taking care of Linden Hill on a regular basis. So we do want to invite you to go to our webpage, which is www.linden-hill.org, and there's a tab that says Get Involved on the top. So if you click on Get Involved, there's going to be a couple different options. So you can choose what you'd be interested in looking at. There's things for volunteering, which of course we're kind of paused on right now because of social distancing. But if that's down the road something you're interested in, there's also a section to be able to become a member. And that simply just means coming alongside of us and saying we believe in what you're doing and we want to be supportive of that, and maybe this year or maybe annually you'd be interested in doing that. And those memberships start out for youth at $10 and for an adult individual just $25. So you can kind of give at whatever level you'd like, but it's a membership, includes a tour once we're open for that kind of thing to happen again, some good perks that exist within that too. And then if you're also just feel inclined to be donating financially to us right now as we're going through this challenging time, there's a donate there too. So I think it's a PayPal donate, and you're able to do that real simply and securely on our website as well. So we just invite you to go ahead and take a look at our website and check out the beautiful pictures if you're just missing this place and you need a little dose. So check out the pictures, find your way around the website, but visit that Get Involved page. That's going to be a key thing for supporting us and making sure that we can see ourselves through this challenging time. Thank you so much.